or SMS now for immediate cover or to have an outsurance broker come to you.
The Centre for Development and Enterprise has released a report on what it says are concerns about the government policy of localization and its impact on the economy. The organisation says government strategy on localization may in fact be undermining our economic prospects. And Bernstein is the Executive Director of the Centre for Development and Enterprise. And good afternoon to you and thank you for your time. I think many people might feel that localization is the right policy. It means that we make things in South Africa. We, as South Africans, would go the argument, should use things, consume things that are made in South Africa by South Africans. What's wrong with that?
Well, it sounds obvious. Stephen, I agree with you. It sounds like we should all support this. But what happens in practice in South Africa is that we are protecting our firms from foreign products. Our firms are either more expensive or they produce goods that are less good than the foreign engine or locomotive that we might need. So we're protecting those firms. Now, a number of things start to happen. One, we all want to export more. But if you protect our local firms, they're less likely to be able to compete in the global marketplace because they're not innovating in order to get market share in South Africa because they're protected. They're not exposed to the global marketplace. So that's one issue. It harms our exports because we need imports in order to make things to export. The second thing is that this becomes self-reinforcing. Who do you think has the most power and loudest voice to make sure that their sector of the industry is protected through localization rules and regulations? Well, it's big companies. And we know we're not a very open economy. We're quite concentrated. We want to open it up for new firms, for new black firms particularly, and foreign firms to come and grow our economy. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is big companies say, oh, we need protection from foreign imports. And then you get used to that if you're a company. Why would you give this up? So you say, oh, no, we need another few years of this. And the economy then becomes a less competitive economy that grows more slowly, that isn't keeping up with the global economy, with which we must integrate as much as possible. So it's counterintuitive, I know, but in fact, the localization policy is holding South Africa back. It adds to costs in our economy, for example, producing energy, or transnet, and there are many other examples, and it's inefficient. So it is counterintuitive, but that's the reality of how this works.
Okay, so then what would we change? Would there be ways that we could stimulate the economy, create new businesses, support in some way new black-owned businesses, while also then changing this policy?
So we're saying this policy is costly and we should get rid of it. That's the first point. The most important things to do to help South African firms, existing, new, old, whatever, small, big, the most important thing to do is to create a much less costly business environment, a much more efficient business environment. And that comes back to the old things. You've got to fix the power situation. You've got to fix transnet and logistics. You've got to deal with crime and many other things. You've got to deregulate as much as possible. So we want an environment where things work. All the things that businesses need. The post office is collapsing, so you don't have that. You use a more expensive private provider. You need an environment which is as cheap as possible, as efficient as possible, and works to help local firms develop, to export, to do everything they need to do. And that's not what we're doing. That's where our focus should be, not on artificial restrictions. Let me give you an example. One of the leading economic consultancies in the country recently said that the local content requirements have increased the cost of production in South Africa's renewable energy sector by at least 10%, and for some firms, as high as 60%. The CEO of Transnet said something similar recently. She said, we cannot be competitive. Local content requirements are pushing up our prices by 10 to 30%. So all of this makes us a much more costly environment for consumers. And if we're going to export more, which is one of the key ingredients in growing our economy. So this all affects jobs.
So all of that may be true, but what is the alternative? I mean, wouldn't it then be that if we do what you suggest, we would be condemned to being a nation of importers, when really, to make money, we need to export? So we would just be customers all the time. We would never actually be producers.
Why do you have such little faith in South African entrepreneurs? We are already competitive in some areas, and we can certainly be more competitive in others. If we look at green energy, we should be taking this as an opportunity. How does South Africa help to decarbonize the world? And where can we be competitive? With which minerals, with all sorts of other things that people are talking about. So I have great faith in South African entrepreneurs. And there are many people who can become entrepreneurs now that our society is much more open to the entire population. I think we can be globally competitive, and that, Namibia is creating globally competitive green energy. They're on the path to doing that. Do you think we can't do that?
It's a nice challenge, Anne. What you're suggesting is quite a hard sell. There are many people who benefit from localization. They will see jobs that are at risk. They will simply see the fact that they're able to get an income now, and they will lose that income if government changes its policy. It's going to be a very tough sell for you, this.
Maybe. We don't know how many people benefit from localization, and we don't know how many people suffer at the moment. So there isn't that kind of data. It would be good to have that. I think large companies in certain sectors like localization, but we've recently ratcheted this up in the last few years, and we've made it more and more onerous. And there's absolutely no doubt that we lose more jobs by more costly production of goods and services than we would gain. So government procurement is much more expensive if you're trying to do this. And that's not what we need. The government is running out of money. So we think, and many of South Africa's leading economists would agree with us, that this is the best road to go to grow the economy and to benefit more people.
Anne Bernstein, thank you. Executive Director at the Centre for Development and Enterprise. An interesting view. I suspect there'll be people who support and oppose